Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. I hope you guys had a great Christmas, by the way, and if you don't celebrate Christmas, well, I hope you had a great couple of days. Now, let's go back to benchmarking. This time, I'm gonna be testing the RTX 3080 Ti 12GB GPU. It's the Founders Edition, by the way, in Stalker 2, or Stutter 2, lag of Chornobyl. As usual, I am running it with the latest Nvidia drivers, and I'm not manually overclocking the card. You can see all of its specs here in Tech Power-Up's GPU Z, and over on the left I'm pairing it with a Ryzen 9 7950X3D CPU with half of its cores disabled, making it the same as a 7800X3D. So I disabled the non-3D Vcache cores, which are slower, and on the memory tab I'm using 32GB of it. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's go over the settings first. I am starting at 1080p, but I'm also going to test this at 1440p and 4K resolutions, and I'm using the high settings preset, which is very similar to the Epic settings in terms of visuals, but it gives you a lot higher performance. So this is my preferred way to play on the 3080 Ti, at least. Over on the upscaling, I'm using DLSS set to DLAA, so it's actually not upscaling from a lower resolution, it's just applying the DLSS anti-aliasing over the native res, and FSR 3.1, which is the frame generation from AMD, is now disabled. We can also utilize it over DLAA or DLSS quality if you want that, and I will test that out later as well. The rest of the settings are set to high, and let's play the game. Oh boy, look at that power consumption. I missed the 3080 Ti, especially now that the weather is actually quite cold here, so it warms up my room very efficiently, this GPU. I like it. Also, what I don't really like too much is the performance, but that's due to the game itself not being very well optimized. 3080 Ti getting just 60 plus FPS basically at 1080p resolution, not even on maxed out settings, just doesn't sit well with me, by the way. And you know what also doesn't sit well with me, guys? Bob over here. So goodbye, Bob. There we go. This is better. I'm gonna start counting our FPS. People are going to start shooting at us. Oh boy. Yes, let's run away from here now. Now this area is actually CPU bound. Sometimes you can see some fluctuation there on the GPU usage. 89% sometimes, 90%, 85%. Yeah, with 60 to 70 frames per second. That's because, yes, my friends, even though we're running a 3080 Ti with a 7800X 3D equivalent, basically, this game requires a higher spec CPU to run properly. I'm stuck here, and I'm very tired. I need to eat, so in the middle of a gunfight, yeah, let's start eating this dog food or whatever this is. But yeah, guys, this game is extremely, oh my god, they're still shooting at me here. It's extremely CPU hungry, and you will need a very beefy CPU if you want 60 plus FPS all of the time. Basically a 7800X 3D or a 14th gen i7 or i9 CPU, or the 9800X 3D, which is the best gaming CPU in the world at the moment. The good news is, out here in the open fields and so on, when you're exploring, it doesn't really get CPU intensive or CPU bound. Usually, even with the 5800X 3D coupled with the 3080 Ti, you'll still see 80s, 90s, and so on, but in that settlement area, everything just goes to hell, basically, and it's so broken in terms of CPU performance. And this is with the latest patch. I am recording this on the 26th of December, and yeah, apparently they improved things just a little bit in terms of CPU performance in this game, but not to the point where those are noticeable improvements, actually. It still runs like crap in terms of the CPU, and GPU performance is also pretty weak once again. Like, this is a very strong GPU. It's close in performance to a 4070 Super, so it's no slouch, okay? It's a big shame to see this GPU getting so low performance, especially at 1080p resolution. Let's enable FSR 3.1 frame generation, though, on top of native 1080p with DLAA. And this implementation of FG is not as good as Nvidia's FG. It makes things ghosting a little bit more and a little bit blurrier, you know. But it still works very well. And if you are after that high refresh rate experience, this actually gives you higher performance than DLSS frame generation. So it's just a little bit lower visually speaking than DLSS FG that you don't have with 30 series, but it's also higher in performance. So there's that, guys. It's a nice technology here, and it kind of saves this game, or, well, it's like a patch fix, you know? It shouldn't be running like this still with FSR FG, but at least it's an option for you to utilize if you want to achieve high refresh rates. My gosh, I shouldn't have killed Bob this time around, or at least this early into the video. Jesus Christ, look at that, all of them. Oh boy, you know what? Maybe we should go ahead and try throwing a grenade at them. Oh yes, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Goodbye, people! Alright, stop defending Bob. I don't even know why you defend Bob so much. Gosh, that bastard, he ruins everything. He is the reason why we get such low FPS in Stalker 2, by the way. Okay? He is the real reason. Anyway, guys, developers shouldn't rely on frame generation to make games playable, you know, but especially if you don't have a 7800X 3D or equivalent in this game, you will need to turn on that frame generation to achieve 60 plus FPS all of the time. In terms of input lag, it's not great in this game. It's actually really noticeable, mainly because mouse acceleration is on by default as well in the config files of the game. You can disable it there, then frame generation will actually feel a little bit better and more responsive, but still, guys, it's not the best implementation of FG's input lag, unfortunately. You have the option of going here, though, into the display settings and enable reflex, which comes on by default if you enable DLSS FG, but not with FSR 3.1 FG, and this helps things a bit more, okay? It's a little bit more responsive right now, but it still has that weird feel from the mouse acceleration coupled with frame generation. So it's still noticeable, the input lag, even with reflex enabled. Still, it makes things a little bit better. FPS are going to be exactly the same, so if you are using frame generation, definitely enable that setting. So yeah, guys, even though it has a lot of input lag, this is probably my preferred way to play this game with this GPU, just because I feel like the FPS were too low at 1080p native resolution for a card of this caliber once again, and I was playing games at 4K native resolution just a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, with this GPU. And now it's only doing 60s, 70s, and 80s at high, not even maxed out settings, and 1080, it just doesn't sit well. Doesn't sit well with me. Anyway, let's disable frame gen and try it at 1440p resolution next. Oh yeah, and this is what happens if you try frame generation and then disable frame generation and then increase resolution. It's still like this, okay? Alright, here we go, guys. 2560 by 1440. I needed to restart the game. And here we are. It doesn't seem like we lost a ton of performance by going from 1080p to 1440p, mainly because we were slightly CPU bound at 1080p resolution, you know, so GPU usage wasn't maxing out all of the time here in the settlement area, and we're getting 60 plus most of the time without the need of utilizing DLSS quality or frame generation. It actually is a pretty solid experience for a 3080 Ti here at 1440, and after seeing the results at 1080p, I thought it was going to be slower than this, but good thing, okay? At least you can still get 60 plus most of the time. Sometimes it will still drop into the 50s, as you can see. We gotta eat once again. The game looks a lot crispier as well at 1440p than it did at 1080p, so it is a no-brainer, basically. If you have a 1080p monitor, you should definitely upgrade to a 1440p one. Even though these games are getting so much more intensive, you still can't kill the birds, okay? The 3080 Ti still has what it takes, as you can see, to run 1440p high settings just fine. It's not going to be a super high refresh rate experience, mainly because, well, this game is not that well optimized, and also because it uses Lumen and Nanite by default, and Lumen especially is software ray tracing, and that's why we've been seeing the FPS being so low in these UE5 titles recently. They all use Lumen by default. You can't really disable it, unfortunately. There's a ton of popping, by the way, on the trees as well. and that just kills the experience FPS-wise and performance-wise. It introduces more stuttering, because ray tracing usually isn't as stable as rasterization, and well, you get way lower FPS. A good example of this is in Fortnite. That game is made by Epic Games, which is who makes the Unreal Engine as well, and they actually give you the option to disable Nanite and Lumen there, and when you do so, the FPS like triple or quadruple in some cases. So yeah, it's a performance killer. We could have had a lot higher performance if it wasn't for that technology, and that's why a lot of people hate UE5 as well. Yeah, it's a shame. I wish all of the games using this engine actually allowed us to disable Lumen. Anyway, I am very sad to see that we couldn't get 69 FPS average here. 70 is 1 FPS higher, of course, so yeah, this is almost a perfect experience at 1440p, but it isn't quite there. 69 would be so much nicer. Now let's enable FSR 3.1's frame generation on top of it. I will also re-enable reflex here, by the way. And now with FSR FG, 1440p, DLEA, high settings, we're getting 120 frames per second. It actually feels kind of impressive right now, or looks... Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Okay, okay, come on, come on, come on. Let's kill these bastards over here. Come on. I'm ruining everything. I'm wasting a lot of bullets here. Okay, these guys, well, they have guns. Oh, this one is a pretty good one, actually. Let me pick that up. Now, there's a lot of input lag here, even with that reflex enabled once again, because the baseline FPS were at 60, and now enabling the frame generation on top of it. Usually in other titles, it feels good, but in this one, once again, for some reason, it doesn't feel as snappy and as responsive as other titles. So I would say frame gen starts feeling pretty good in this one if you have a baseline of like 80 frames or 70 frames per second, not 60, okay? Not to say that this is unplayable, because it isn't, but it just makes it harder for you to aim at people like right now. I'm having a bit of trouble here where I shouldn't be. Oh boy, there's a war going on here. What the heck? Damn. Oh, let's eat, actually. My boy's hungry here, and it's not regenerating stamina as fast as previously. So yeah, let's check this out. So these guys are friendly, I guess, because the sights turn green when I aim at them. Oh, the crosshair, actually. That was it? I helped you a lot, didn't I? Yeah, 120 on average feels really solid. Not gonna lie. It's just, I wish the input lag was a lot better than it actually is. But aside from that, and if you can live with that, and a lot of people won't even notice the input lag, which is insane to me, but my friend, for example, plays with 80 to 100 frames per second in this game with FG on, okay? So baseline FPS would be 40 to 60, and he's fine. He's absolutely fine. He loves it. He's enjoying the game like crazy, and I'm like looking at him play with that amount of input lag, and... oh. How can you handle this? Let's use quality DLSS though instead of the frame generation to improve our frame rate over what we were getting natively. And let's use a little bit more sharpness there on the image. And now it's frame generation off, so we're actually going to be CPU bound here, as you can see. 80-something% GPU usage, sometimes it goes up to 99%, so of course in some little areas here inside of the settlement, it's still going to be GPU bound. It's not like the 7800X3D will bottleneck a 3080 Ti all of the time in this title, but it will sometimes, or very few times, especially in these settlements, and especially if you go into the settlement, like for example you're coming here, you're running to get into it, then it starts dropping a lot, as you can see, into the 60s. Previously, in the release version of the game, it was even more broken, okay, on the CPU side of things. They've fixed CPU performance slightly now, and it would actually drop into the high 40s, low 50s when entering the settlements like this, once again. Now it doesn't, okay? It doesn't drop as much. It's a lot more stable than what it used to be, but that frame time still has a lot of issues, a lot of spikes, a lot of little stutters, micro-stuttering everywhere. Running around the open world also makes you stutter a little bit, so it's still not fixed anywhere near being fixed, okay? Now, we're getting pretty much the same FPS as we saw at 1080p native resolution. You usually get around the same frames with 1440p quality DLSS, but of course, quality DLSS at 1440p looks way better than 1080p native, actually. So, yeah, if you have a 1440p monitor and you don't want to use FG because the input lag annoys you like crazy, this is probably the way to go if you want to get a little bit higher than 60 frames per second or 70 on average, which is what we got previously at native 1440. Still, native 1440 was a great experience. If all you need is 60 FPS plus most of the time, it will get you that, of course. Oh my god. Oh boy. There we go. It's all good. Oh, not a grenade, please. Hey, come on. Come on. Come on. All right, there we go. Goodbye. Oh, these are Bob's pets, guys. Okay, we're good. We're good. Oh, boy. Oh, there's another one. Jack, stop! But well, guys, that's it at 1440p quality DLSS. It doesn't look absolutely amazing, okay? Because the game is quite soft even at native resolution, even with DLAA. Stop it! Stop it! Now, obviously, you have the option of enabling FG over quality DLSS. So if a little bit softer visuals with a bit more ghosting and artifacting don't bother you and you just want to get closer to those 144 frames per second, as you can see, it's possible to get that here with all of these technologies enabled. It's a good thing that this isn't FSR 3.0, because if it was, that would mean that we wouldn't be able to use frame generation over DLSS or DLAA, and then it would look really pixelated compared to this. But thankfully, we can have DLSS plus FG in this title. All right, let's go back to the stuttering area here, the settlement again. And now it drops into the 110s sometimes, as you can see. Yeah, 120s while entering. So when it drops to these values, it starts feeling a little bit more input laggy, of course. Still has some stuttering issues here and there, but overall, it's a decent experience in terms of smoothness and so on. And if you can get away with these softer looking graphics right now, it's going to be a fine experience. So yeah, that's it for 1440p resolution. I'll need to restart the game to disable the frame generation and so on. So I'm gonna go back to DLAA here, FSR 3.1 disabled, high settings, and we're gonna try it at 4K for a little bit. Oh boy. And here we have it, guys, getting 30 plus still at 4K native resolution with DLAA. That's actually not too bad. 3080 Ti, man, it still has what it takes to run this. Even at 4K, even with the Lumen stuff enabled, software ray tracing and so on, it can still play this super intensive title okay-ish at native 4K. And oh boy, my friends, whenever you have these UE5 titles with forced TAA and stuff like that enabled all of the time, which make things look pretty soft, especially at lower resolutions, you know, and you play them at 4K resolution, 4K kind of fixes things. Not all of the things, because I can still notice a lot of shimmering there on the tree, like a lot of artifacting. It's weird. It's really weird, and softness as well in the picture in some areas. I can still notice that, and a lot of other games don't really have those issues, thankfully, at 4K. But it makes things a lot better looking than 1440p and 1080p here, to the point where I'm not really sure if I would actually trade off the visuals right now, because these are clean visuals mostly, to play at a higher frame rate. Even with 60 plus FPS, like this looks so much better right now. It's kind of crazy. Thing is, at 4K resolution, we can enable quality DLSS and get closer to those 60 FPS on average. So this is it, and this is going to upscale the picture from 1440p to the 4K native res, and it still looks pretty much the same as 4K native, while getting 15 higher FPS. So this is the way to go, I think, if you value the visuals, if you want the best visuals possible with close to 60 FPS on average. This is it, I think. Quality DLSS will look almost indistinguishable from the native 4K resolution. It's really, really good technology at the higher resolutions, you know. And here we can get 60 plus outside of the settlement area, as you can see. We're getting between 60 and 70 most of the time, but obviously in the settlement it will still drop a little bit. This is a solid experience. It dips down into the 50s sometimes. What about balanced DLSS? This usually doesn't give me as much of a FPS boost as I'd like compared to quality DLSS over native resolution, you know. It's getting us like, what, 5 more frames? But here in this case, it might make sense to play on balanced DLSS because, well, you go from drops into the 50s to maybe drops into the low 60s, which is going to be a heck of a lot better, of course, and a lot more stable. In terms of graphics fidelity, though, balanced DLSS is not too far off from quality DLSS at 4K resolution, but you can start noticing a bit more softness, a bit more mushy looking trees at the distance and so on, and the vegetation is a little bit less detailed right now, so you can tell the difference, okay, even though it's only like 8% resolution scale difference, and as you can see, it's still dropping into the 50s, but not by too much. It's only when you enter the settlement areas. Once again, over here it still gets 60s. Alright, you know, if you're playing at 4K, this is the way to go. And on top of that, if you don't mind having that frame generation input lag, you know, you can always go here. The baseline FPS were at 60 or 50 plus all of the time, so it's not going to be completely awful of an experience with FG. And since this is FSR FG, whew, it makes things so much smoother. It also gives you a higher FPS boost than DLSS FG found on the 40 series GPUs, so you can actually get up to 100 plus in the settlement areas. Outside of here, probably like 120s, 110s. It's a solid experience, guys, with very good visuals still. Very smooth experience, even at 4K resolution. It is possible, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. We started at 1080p native, 60/70s, not impressive at all, but now we're getting close to 4K visuals, you know, and actually you could say these are 4K visuals, and getting 100 plus because of frame generation, and 60 plus still without frame generation. Really, really nice stuff, actually. There's even no need to go to performance DLSS, I guess, but I will test it anyways. And with performance DLSS, this renders the game at 1080p and upscales to 4K. Still looks a lot better than 1080p. It looks better on a 4K display than 1440p native on other displays. So 4K performance DLSS is still a very viable option. What is going on? The game is bugging out probably because I disabled frame generation and I'm testing it now without frame generation. Sometimes when you do that, it bugs itself. Pretty solid. Once again, this is the way to get 60 plus FPS all of the time at 4K resolution. Although, again, you can see a lot more artifacts here with performance DLSS. Of course, some more softer looking vegetation especially. But yeah, you can get those 60 plus, as you can see. Really solid experience still, and I think, again, on a 32-inch monitor and 27-inch monitor at 4K resolution, performance DLSS is probably the way to go, guys, because it will look really, really good. It's good to see that even though it was underwhelming at 1080p, it still can impress us at higher resolutions. It's also very sad to see the state of this game still when it comes to performance and optimization. It's pretty bad, but, well, again, hopefully they can improve that. And right now, you can run it on the 3080 Ti, so if you were on the fence on buying this game, I guess you can buy it. Well, it's up to you, of course, because you've watched the video, obviously, and now you make your own decision. I would probably still wait a little bit until they fix the micro stuttering issues that we keep seeing in this game, and other issues as well. But right now, if you really, really want to play this game on 3080 Ti, as you can see, it works. Thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed. I'll be back very soon with another one in Stalker 2 as well. The 7900 Grey, or GRE, is next, so stay tuned in for that. And I'll catch you then. Love you all. Bye-bye.